Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this talk about Lady Wallace to mark International Women's Day. A few words about the images that you're going to see. All the images that don't have accompanying ownership information belong to the Wallace Collection. Lady Wallace has earned her place in history as the benefactress who, on her death in 1897, bequeathed the Wallace Collection to the British nation. It comprises the works of art that were on the ground and first floors of her London residence, Hertford House. The collection was formed by the first to fourth Marquises of Hertford and the likely illegitimate son of the fourth Marquis, her husband, Sir Richard Wallace. During the formal opening of the Wallace Collection on the 22nd of June 1900, Lord Rosebery, Chairman of Trustees, described the Wallace Collection as, quote, "the greatest gift, I believe, that has ever been made by an individual to our country." Yet through much of the museum's history, little attention has focused on Lady Wallace. There are several reasons for this. She was not herself a collector of substance. We know nothing written in her own hand. Negative accounts of her by contemporaries published in the 20th century haven't served her well. And she was a Frenchwoman living in England, yet disinclined or unable to speak English, and shy by nature. Yet, in terms of social mobility, Lady Wallace's life story is remarkable for her time. Born in Paris to unmarried parents, a factotum and a linen maid, on the 15th of March, 1819, and named Julie Amélie Charlotte Castelnau, Lady Wallace died an immensely wealthy woman at Hertford House in London, her home for the last 25 years of her life, and now the home of the Wallace Collection. Her husband, the collector and philanthropist Sir Richard Wallace, had predeceased her in 1890. He left to her one of the greatest private art collections ever formed, about half of which comprises the Wallace Collection. The rest of the collection, together with her properties in Paris and the north of Ireland, she left to the Wallace's private secretary, John Murray Scott. The Wallace Collection is especially renowned for its 18th century French paintings, Sèvres porcelain, furniture and gold boxes, but also has superb holdings of Old Master paintings, European arms and armour, and medieval and Renaissance decorative arts. Here you see Sir Richard and Lady Wallace in 1871-2. Richard Wallace had been born illegitimately in London and brought up from the age of 7 in Paris by the third Marchioness of Hertford, who was separated from her husband, the third Marquis. She lived in the adjacent street to her oldest son, Richard Seymour Conway, who inherited the title of fourth Marquis of Hertford on the death of his father in 1842. He is the likely father of Richard Wallace, who came to act as his art agent. Although they didn't marry until February 1871, when they were both in their early 50s, Richard Wallace and Lady Julie Castelnau had known each other since at least 1839, when he was 21 and she 20. What do we know of Julie's life before their marriage? She and Richard have traditionally been described as having met when Julie was working as an assistant in a Parisian perfume shop, but a contemporary document indicates that she was perhaps additionally a dressmaker. In 1840, Julie gave birth to their son, who was baptized at the age of 8 with his mother's surname as Georges Henry Edmund Castelnau. Richard Wallace appears to have lived separately from his mistress and son during the boy's childhood. It would be 30 years before Richard and Julie married. What was the reason for this? It has been claimed that because the fourth Marquis of Hertford disapproved of Julie Castelnau, Richard and Julie were obliged to defer marrying until after Lord Hertford's death in 1870. Were this the case, though, it seems strange that photographs of Richard Wallace and Lord Hertford had equal prominence in the boudoir at Hertford House, a room closely associated with Lady Wallace, as this slide shows. So here you see a detail of the boudoir with a photograph of Richard Wallace on the left and a photograph of the fourth Marquis on the right. A further indication that Lord Hertford's disapproval may not have been the reason for their late marriage is provided by the occupancy records for 1 to 3 Rue Taitbout, a property owned by Lord Hertford and close to his own home. They show, as the arrows indicate, that Julie Castelnau was one of the tenants living in the property in the early 1860s. It is also Richard and Julie's address on their marriage certificate of February 1871. According to an account written shortly after Lady Wallace's death, Richard and Julie lived together for 20 years before their marriage. It seems that Julie didn't mix in Wallace's social circles before their marriage. She's not shown in any of these photographs of Richard Wallace and their son Georges, taken when Richard and Georges were staying with a friend in 1862-3. And at the top left, you see Richard Wallace and Georges, his son, playing dominoes, watched over by their host. And then here on the top right, Richard talking to Georges, who's mounted on a horse. And then bottom left, here we have father and son standing together with very similar poses. And then on the right here, Richard seated at the table with friends and Georges looking over his shoulder. And in fact, so Julie is absent from these photographs. And in fact, Wallace seems not to have been faithful to her. He's believed to have had other liaisons, including one with the Bohemian literary hostess, Apollonie Sabatier. The fourth Marquis of Hertford died on the 24th of August, 1870, during the Franco-Prussian War, just as the Prussian army was approaching Paris to begin the siege of the city that culminated in a disastrous French defeat. Soon after Lord Hertford's death, Richard Wallace learnt to his surprise that he'd inherited the fourth Marquis's unentailed estate, including properties in Paris and his magnificent art collection. The situation in Paris during the siege was desperate, and Wallace immediately began to give major funds to help the destitute, as well as chairing the committee of the British Charitable Fund, which helped impoverished British citizens in France. And this photograph shows Wallace in the centre, chairing the committee of the British Charitable Fund in March 1871. The photograph on the left shows the Wallace's son Georges Castelnau in army uniform. In the midst of the hardship following the French defeat, on the 11th of February 1871, Wallace legally recognised his 30-year-old son. 4 days later, Julie and Richard married. There are indications that Julie may have attempted to put her background on a more socially acceptable footing. On their marriage certificate, you see a transcript of it on the right, her deceased parents are described as married, and she later said that her father had been a soldier. Both statements have yet to be confirmed. By 1880, she was using her second given name, Amelie, in place of Julie. I don't know whether this change has social status implications or was simply a personal preference. These images illustrate the extraordinary transformation that took place in Sir Richard Wallace's life in 1871-2, catapulting him to fame and celebrity. On the left, you see one of the many begging letters that required no more of an address to reach him than Paris. So this one that you see is addressed to Monsieur Richard Wallace, millionaire anglais, en ville, because it's written by somebody in Paris. And on the right, an engraving published in the Illustrated London News in December 1872, celebrating his philanthropy on both sides of the Channel. Although he'd lived in Paris from childhood, Wallace was a British citizen. In August 1871, Queen Victoria awarded his philanthropy with a baronetcy, and he and Julie became Sir Richard and Lady Wallace. For Lady Wallace, the adjustment required to adapt to the transformation of her life from one of obscurity to one of prominence as the wife of a renowned philanthropist, art connoisseur and collector must have been profound. Several months later, Sir Richard and Lady Wallace moved to England and made Hertford House in Manchester Square, London, their main residence. They maintained homes and major interests in Paris, where they still spent a good deal of their time. Their decision to make London their main residence was undoubtedly influenced by their experience of revolutions, war, and the Commune in France, in contrast to the greater political stability of Victorian Britain. This bust of Lady Wallace by Auguste Charles Le Bourg marks the transformation in Julie's life from obscurity to prominence. It was exhibited at the Paris Salon in 1872. Rarely, for a woman of her time, Lady Wallace's life spanned the social and cultural divide between her French working class origins and her privileged status in Britain. Perhaps this was a factor in her later decision to remain in England after her husband's death in 1890. By early 1872, the Wallaces had made the move to London, and as this caricature of Sir Richard, published in Vanity Fair in 1873 shows, he quickly became an establishment figure and a member of Parliament. He had large estates in Suffolk and the north of Ireland. Through philanthropic endeavours involving his collection, Wallace enhanced his status and popularity in British society. His most famous benefaction was his loan from 1872 until 1875 of more than 2,000 works of art for the opening exhibition at the Bethnal Green Museum in a deprived neighbourhood in East London. This print records the opening of the exhibition by the Prince of Wales on the 24th of June, 1872. During the run of the exhibition, Sir Richard extended Hertford House to accommodate his growing collection and his household. The Wallaces began receiving visitors in 1876. As the first page of their visitors' book on the right shows, from the outset, royal and aristocratic visitors came to Hertford House. The Wallaces were generous hosts, sometimes throwing large parties on summer afternoons that were attended by several hundred people. Invitations were issued in Lady Wallace's name. An impression of one such party is conveyed by this newspaper report from June 1883, and I quote, "Lady Wallace gave one of her delightful parties at Hertford House and threw open the galleries of the most magnificent house in London. The engineers played in the garden court and the Blue Hungarians in the great gallery. Lady Wallace evidently enjoyed music because she had a grand piano in her reception room, and a French polka was composed for her by Dabadi." Perhaps inevitably, Lady Wallace remained an outsider in British society, the circumstances of her son's birth and her reluctance to speak English being significant disadvantages. Contemporaries found her company awkward. Recalling a dinner in November 1872, when he was a guest at the Wallaces' Suffolk estate, Sudbourne, the first Earl of Cranbourne wrote, quote, "Lady Wallace speaks only French, and I took her in, to my dismay, and stumbled through some very bad language." Ferdinand de Rothschild, who regarded Lady Wallace as plain in appearance and intellectually undistinguished, thought that she dragged her husband down to her social and intellectual level. He noted that although society was willing to accept Richard Wallace's hospitality and to shake hands with Lady Wallace under her own roof, people would not reciprocate to her. Baron Ferdinand considered Sir Richard and Lady Wallace an ill-suited couple, yet recognised that, as he said, the happiness of her home must have afforded him the happiness of his home, Richard Wallace's, must have afforded him ample compensation for the loss of social amenities that he experienced as a result of declining invitations that excluded his wife. But through the second half of the 20th and into the 21st century, it's been speculated that the Wallaces were an ill-assorted and unhappy couple, in part due to the publication of negative accounts of Lady Wallace. The situation hasn't been helped by a failure to recognise the evidence of their bedroom. Throughout the museum's history, it has been assumed that the only bedroom on the first floor of Hertford House in the far southwest corner, that's this room I'm indicating here with an arrow, that the only bedroom on the first floor of Hertford House in the far southwest corner was just used by Lady Wallace. The reason for this must be that in the 1890 inventory of the house, taken after Sir Richard's death, the room is described as Lady Wallace's bedroom. Yet this plan of the first floor of Hertford House, made soon after Lady Wallace's death in 1897, shows that the couple must have shared what is the only bedroom on this floor. And I've indicated the bedroom with a red arrow, both in the image of the whole of the first floor and in the image just of the front of the building on the first floor, where you see the private rooms of Sir Richard and Lady Wallace. And so you can see that the bedroom here is very close to both of their bathrooms and dressing rooms there. Other contemporary sources, previously unknown or overlooked, refer to this room as the state bedroom, showing that it was indeed the couple's bedroom. Baron Ferdinand's observation about the happiness of Wallace's home appears to be borne out by the contents of this room. Furnished with lightly coloured fabrics and delicate 18th century furniture, the bedroom was opulently hung with a treasure trove of essential 18th century paintings, including 4 mythological panels by Boucher, 2 of which you see here, and Fragonard's Risqué, The Swing. It appears to have been a veritable love nest. In May 1872, Sir Richard Wallace acquired the Sudbourne estate in Suffolk. Its seat was Sudbourne Hall, which you see on the left. The Wallaces hosted shooting parties there. On the right, you see them at the centre of one such party in 1883. The Sudbourne staff included 40 gardeners, 17 stablemen, and 23 gamekeepers. In 1879, the Prince of Wales, later Edward VII, was one of the party. He seemed enchanted by his 4-day visit, during which 4,000 head of game were killed. Lady Wallace assisted Sir Richard in his duties as Lord of the Manor, which he carried out assiduously and enthusiastically. On their first visit to the estate in September 1872, they provided and served a meal to 170 children of the poor at the National School in Orford. Lady Wallace undertook annual engagements on the estate, such as distributing gifts to children at the Sudbourne festival known as the Orford Christmas Tree. Lady Wallace supported Sir Richard's philanthropic endeavours with smaller scale acts of charity. The top 3 images here show in the centre All Saints Church in Sudbourne, flanked by gifts that she gave in the context of the Sudbourne estate, and they're both still in use today. So when in 1878-9, Sir Richard paid for the restoration of the church, Lady Wallace presented the Bible that you see on the right, and on the left you see the Wallace Cup. So this one here, the Wallace Cup, which she presented to the Orford Regatta in 1877. In Paris in the 1880s, Sir Richard chaired the committee for the building of St. George's Anglican Church and contributed a significant amount of the funding for it. Lady Wallace gave the church a liturgical set in silver plate, and below at the bottom here, you see a detail of the base of the chalice that she gave to the church, inscribed to that effect. So you may be able to make out that it says presented by Lady Wallace. Lady Wallace also played her part on philanthropic committees related to Wallace's large estate in the north of Ireland. In 1876, Sir Richard lent pictures to the Industrial Exhibition and Bazaar held in Belfast to raise funds for the Belfast Working Men's Institute and Temperance Hall. The bazaar was organised under the patronage of the Duchess of Abercorn and Lady Wallace. Perhaps surprisingly, since Lady Wallace is not known to have been a collector in her own right, she lent to two exhibitions alongside her husband. The first of these was the Lone Museum of Art Treasures exhibition in Dublin in 1873. The second, represented here, was held in Paris in 1884 by the Union Centrale des Arts Décoratifs, of which Wallace had been a founding member. Lady Wallace's name as a lender is indicated here by the red arrows. So you see the front of the exhibition catalogue on the left, and then you see in the middle two images show manuscripts from the archives of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, showing the addresses of lenders on the left with I've indicated Lady Wallace's name below that of Sir Richard. Then on the right in the middle, a list of her loans to the exhibition. And then on the far right, where it says, you can see she's lent a bonheur du jour, a piece of furniture, and it says collection of Lady Wallace. And in fact, Lady Wallace lent to this exhibition Chinese and Japanese porcelain and 18th century French works of art, including Sèvres vases, this piece of furniture that you can see the catalogue entry for, and a painting by Boucher, La Musique, which were described as being, as I've said, from her collection specifically. The couple's comfortable relationship seems to be reflected in this photograph. Here, Lady Wallace is sitting alongside her husband, so you see Sir Richard and Lady Wallace here, and they're sitting in a very sort of easy and informal way with friends on the steps of the Chateau de Bagatelle, just in the Bois de Boulogne, just to the west of Paris. They used it as their summer residence. Ferdinand de Rothschild wrote derisively, but perhaps illuminatingly, that Lady Wallace preferred a drive in the Bois de Boulogne, cafe dinners, and the French theatre to conversing with clever and distinguished people. Here you see the Wallaces' granddaughter, Georgette, who they may never have met. From the mid-1870s, the Wallaces were oppressed by a burden of disappointment. Sir Richard's aspiration that his son might move to England and a new baronetcy might be created with remainder to his son was declined by Queen Victoria in 1875 on the grounds that granting a revision to an illegitimate son would set an ill-advised precedent. Soon afterwards, the Wallaces' relationship with their son broke down irretrievably, probably because he refused to settle in England in fulfillment of Sir Richard's British dynastic ambition. Instead, he lived in Paris, where he and his mistress, Amélie Suzanne Gall, had 4 children born between 1872 and 1878. The Wallaces seem not to have known their grandchildren. There were 3 boys and a girl. Sir Richard died in Paris in July 1890. According to a contemporary, the Wallaces were devoted to each other. Her husband's death was a terrible blow for Lady Wallace. In her official notification of his death, she emphasised his philanthropy, quoting St. Paul. So the card that she sent out to people letting them know that Sir Richard had died said, "These 3 remain, faith, hope and charity, but the greatest of these is charity." The following year, Lady Wallace again highlighted Sir Richard's benevolence by memorialising him in Lisbon Cathedral on his Irish estate, with a stained glass window shown on the right, depicting the Good Samaritan, with the inscription, "Go and do thou likewise." In 1892, she offered Ipswich Museum, she gave to Ipswich Museum, the bronze sculpture of a stag and hounds that you see on the left, which Sir Richard had planned to donate to Ipswich Museum. It was accepted and placed in the location Sir Richard had had in mind for it, outside the Victoria Library adjacent to the museum. Sadly, it was later deaccessioned and is now lost. After Sir Richard's death, Lady Wallace found herself responsible for a celebrated art collection in properties in London and Paris, an estate in Ireland, the Chateau of Bagatelle, and various tenanted properties in Paris, as well as the management of the Hertford British Hospital in Paris. She came to rely heavily on, I'm not sure that I said actually, that the Hertford British Hospital was founded by Sir Richard Wallace after the fourth Marquis of Hertford's death in memory of the fourth Marquis. And the building for it was completed in 1877. So Wallace had been really involved in its management, and Lady Wallace took over that responsibility. She came to rely heavily on Wallace's private secretary of many years, John Murray Scott, who you see on the right. She channeled her charitable activities and contributions to public life, such as exhibition loans, through Scott. She continued to support a number of her husband's philanthropic activities by, for example, honouring his annual contributions to the British Charitable Fund and expressing her views on aspects of the day-to-day running of the Hertford British Hospital, from issues such as drainage to whether the hospital might have a dog. Lady Wallace has been depicted in Widowhood as being overwhelmingly dependent on Scott. But letters from Scott to the doctor in charge of the Hertford British Hospital, which were only fairly recently discovered, reveal a more authoritative figure, with firm ideas about the management of the hospital. Her authority is amusingly demonstrated in a letter Scott wrote to the doctor describing how a visit to Brighton had been postponed due to Lady Wallace having been ill, but, quote, "but she is moving about again, and I suppose the March bugle will soon sound now." Lady Wallace continued Sir Richard's initiative in lending to the Royal Academy's annual Old Master exhibitions. In total, she lent more than 40 paintings, the majority Dutch, including in 1892, Jan Steen's Celebrating the Birth that you see on the left, which had been acquired by Sir Richard. She also lent goldsmith's work, including the English steeple cup shown on the right, which Sir Richard had also acquired. In Widowhood too, Lady Wallace lent works of art from her Paris residences to 2 exhibitions in Paris. The first was held in 1892 at the fashionable gallery owned by the picture dealer Georges Petit, who had been a tenant of Sir Richard's. It was mounted in aid of the Union des Ateliers de Femmes, or Union of Women's Workshops. The second exhibition in Paris that Lady Wallace lent to was Marie-Antoinette et son temps, in 1894, to which Lady Wallace lent 18th century French sculpture and furniture. Lady Wallace maintained contact with some of the elite in British society whom she and Sir Richard had known. It was in this context that she gave away 2 paintings from the collection and acquired 1. As the result of a picture swap with Alfred de Rothschild, Isaac van Ostad's Travellers Outside an Inn left the collection, which gained in exchange the artist's A Winter Scene that you see here. In 1893, Lady Wallace parted with William Powell Frith's Anne Page, which you see here. She gave it as a wedding present to the Duke of York and Princess Mary of Teck, later George V and Queen Mary. They were the children, respectively, of the Prince and Princess of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Teck. I mentioned earlier that the relationship between Sir Richard and Lady Wallace and their son broke down irretrievably in the mid-1870s. Tragically, their son predeceased them in 1887 at the age of 46. When Lady Wallace died at Hertford House of bronchitis and acute Bright's disease, aged 77, on the 16th of February, 1897, she bequeathed to her grandchildren a large residential and commercial building that Sir Richard had built on the Boulevard des Italiens in Paris. This was the property that Sir Richard had indicated should be left to them. Although a substantial multi-tenanted building, it was a meagre offering given her enormous assets. What became of the Wallaces' grandchildren? Here you see their granddaughter, who you saw as a child earlier, their granddaughter Georgette, who became a celebrated opera singer in Paris under the stage name Lucy Arbel. Given her grandfather's wonderful art collection, it's amusing to see her on the right, posing as the Mona Lisa. The oldest grandson, Marie Richard, interestingly, they all have Richard. All the three sons have Richard in their names, as of course the fourth Marquis had been Richard and Wallace had been Richard. So the oldest grandson, Richard George Wallace, had a distinguished military career. And he was the only one of the grandchildren to go on and have descendants, and their line continues today. The second grandson, Richard Henry, was both wounded and honoured in the First World War, while Edmund Georges Richard, the youngest grandson, was killed in action in 1915. This is a transcript of the first page of Lady Wallace's will. Her bequest of the works of art on the ground and first floors of Hertford House to the British nation is indicated by the red arrow. Aside from the bequest to her grandchildren and a number of individual legacies and charitable donations, the very substantial remainder of her estate went to John Murray Scott, if you remember, the personal secretary of Sir Richard. Scott was devastated by the demise of the woman who Lord Esher described as, quote, a very refined, shy and excellent lady. In a letter to the doctor in charge of the Hertford British Hospital, Scott wrote a few days after Lady Wallace's demise, quote, only those who, like yourself, knew her intimately can gauge the extent of my sorrow for the life of one for whom I had the greatest affection. After a close friendship of 26 years, the wrench of separation has been terrible, and it will be a long time before I shall be able to reconcile myself to the change in my existence. Given her punctiliousness in continuing Sir Richard's charitable activities, it seems very likely that Lady Wallace was following Sir Richard's intention in leaving the Wallace collection to the nation. Contemporaries believed that Wallace had begun negotiations with the government, but illness had obliged him to put his plans on hold, and Sir Richard hadn't pursued his idea any further, but left the collection and its fate in his wife's hands. There is an alternative narrative concerning Lady Wallace's reason for bequeathing the collection to the nation, one that was published in the periodical Vanity Fair in 1909, that is, in Scott's lifetime and while he was a trustee of the Wallace Collection. The author wrote of Scott and the Wallace Collection, quote, it is no longer a secret that this collection was offered to him, that is Scott, by Lady Wallace, but at his suggestion was bequeathed by her to the English nation. This account of the bequest was perpetuated in the Wallace Collection's own publications until 1920. The bequest to the nation would certainly have been in Scott's interest. This is because a month before Lady Wallace made her will, the government introduced estate duty. As a residual legatee who was not related to the deceased, Scott would have been liable to a higher rate of tax than that required of a relative. Lady Wallace's bequest to the nation was exempt from tax, reducing the high rate that would otherwise have been payable by Scott on his inheritance. However, given the ways in which Lady Wallace continued and fulfilled Sir Richard's intentions and commitments in other areas after his death, it seems most likely that she was honouring his wishes in making her bequest to the nation. When the Wallace Collection opened to the public in June 1900, it added a new dimension to the dedicated individual or family museum. Perhaps unique at the time, in being bequeathed by a widow whose child had predeceased her, Lady Wallace's bequest was also remarkable in being a discreet museum gifted by a woman and having been given to the British nation by a foreigner of humble birth. In the early days of the Wallace collection, no visitor could have failed to appreciate Lady Wallace's pivotal role in gifting the collection to the nation. As you see here, her marble bust by Le Bourg had pride of place on the half landing of the grand staircase, below an ornate stone cartouche commemorating her bequest, inscribed, "The Wallace Collection, bequeathed to the British nation by Amelie, widow of Sir Richard Wallace, Bart, KCB. Yet over the years, Lady Wallace's identity and her personal agency in bequeathing the collection to the nation have been notably understated. What are the reasons for this, and to what extent has the situation fluctuated in the almost 121 years since the museum's opening? In spite of this magnificent act of philanthropy, Lady Wallace has traditionally been regarded in a negative light. And as I've explained, negative accounts of her by her contemporaries, published in the 20th century, damaged the perception of her. Despite her crucial role in bequeathing the Wallace collection to the nation, recognition of Lady Wallace as one of the museum's founders has fluctuated. Her bust by Le Bourg was displayed in a founder's room in the Wallace collection in the earlier 20th century, so after it had been removed from the position that we see in the photograph here. And she's sometimes included among the founders in Wallace Collection publications. Yet this isn't always the case, as this rather begrudging acknowledgement of her role, published in successive editions of a guide to the Wallace Collection between 2010 and 2016, illustrates. It says, "Not an art collector herself, and therefore not one of the founders, Lady Wallace nevertheless bequeathed the collection to the British nation in 1897. Yet in bequeathing the Wallace collection to the British nation, Lady Wallace's achievement went beyond gifting what the Prince of Wales described at the official opening of the museum as, quote, one of the finest collections in the world, a collection of which every civilized nation must envy us. At a key period in the growth of the women's movement, Lady Wallace's magnificent gift also helped to raise awareness of the major contribution that women could play in shaping the public sphere. As a woman, Lady Wallace was almost unprecedented in gifting a discreet museum to the public. Her example can be seen as a trailblazer for later female donors of dedicated museums, most notably Nelly Jacquemart's bequest to the Institut de France of the Musée Jacquemart-André, which opened in 1913, and Isabella Stewart Gardner's bequest of her eponymous museum in Boston, which opened in 1924. Both women visited Hertford House in Lady Wallace's lifetime. In making her bequest of the Wallace collection to the nation, Lady Wallace focused national awareness on the major contribution that women could play in shaping the public sphere. Thank you.